Every house, every king, and every battle has its own truth. But there are stories older than crowns, darker than the night, and more dangerous than any blade. They were never written in books. They were whispered to fire, to the trees, and to the dead gods. And today, we dare to uncover one of them. In the deep ages of the world, long before the Seven Kingdoms were named, when dragons were still but whispers, and Valyria yet unrisen from the sea, the lands of Westeros lay cloaked in endless winter. It was the age after the long night, a time when the dead had walked and the sun had hidden her face for a generation. Ice still haunted the northern hills, and the wind howled like wolves mourning their lost kin. From the frozen forests to the shattered villages, the people of the north wandered in fear and hunger. The old gods watched in silence through the weirwood's red eyes, while the last of the children of the forest crept deeper into their hidden vales, mourning the folly of men. Amid this desolation walked a boy, tall for his years, lean with eyes as gray as a storm upon the sea. His name was Brandon, though in time the world would know him as Bran the Builder. Bran had seen the long night end. He was but a child then, wrapped in furs by the fire as shadows screamed beyond the walls. He remembered his mother's voice telling tales of the dawn, of heroes who drove back the others, of the first men who fought beside the children with dragon glass and fire. But those heroes were gone now, their bones buried in snow and their names forgotten. The peace they had won was brittle, like thin ice over deep water. When the sun returned, Bran felt a stirring in his heart, a need to build, to shape the world anew. He wandered the north seeking remnants of the old realms, villages where hope still flickered. Yet everywhere he went, he found ruin. Halls burned by rival chieftains, cairns of the dead, and weirwoods weeping sap the color of blood. One night, while camped beside a frozen river, Bran dreamed. In his dream, the sky was full of green fire, and beneath it, he saw a vast wall of ice rising between mountain and sea. Upon that wall stood men wrapped in black, holding torches that never dimmed. Behind them loomed a darkness vast as night itself, and from that darkness came whispers of cold and death. When Bran woke, the fire had gone out, yet his heart burned with purpose. He did not yet understand what the dream meant, but he knew it was a vision. The old gods were showing him something, a task that would outlast him and his children after him. He traveled east to the Frostfang Mountains, where the last of the giants still roamed. These were no gentle creatures, but ancient beings with hair like frost and voices like thunder. The men of the north feared them, calling them man-eaters and monsters, but Bran was not afraid. For in his dreams, he had seen them lifting stones as great as keeps. He knew they held strength enough to shape the world. It was there, in a narrow pass of snow and rock, that Bran found a wounded giant. The creature lay half-buried beneath an avalanche, its leg crushed by stone. Its eyes opened when Bran drew near, eyes the color of ice under moonlight. Though its voice was low and rumbling, Bran understood the meaning behind the growls. The giant was dying. Bran worked through the night, melting snow for water, gathering wood for fire. He spoke softly to the giant, though he knew not whether it listened. When dawn came, pale and cold, the giant stirred and pointed north, toward the white horizon. "The cold returns," it rumbled. "You build, or all fall." Then it died, and the mountain wind carried its final breath away. Bran buried the giant beneath a cairn of stone and swore an oath upon its grave that he would build something strong enough to stand against the darkness should it ever come again. He did not know how or where, only that the gods had chosen him. From that day forth, he began his long journey, seeking wisdom from the children of the forest and the lore of the first men. He crossed rivers frozen thick with ice, forests haunted by the cries of wolves, and valleys where the snow lay so deep it buried horses whole. He walked alone, guided by dreams and the whispering of the trees. At last, after many moons, he came to a grove of ancient weirwoods, their faces carved long ago by the hands of gods or men. The air there was still, heavy with age and memory. As Bran knelt before the largest tree, its red sap glistened like tears. He pressed his hand to its bark and whispered his vow again, to build a wall that would never fall, a shield for the realms of men. Then the wind stirred, though no leaf moved. A voice older than time itself whispered from the roots and the leaves and the snow beneath his feet. Build, Bran, but know this, nothing made by mortal hands endures forever. To build you must give, to guard you must lose. Bran felt fear then, but also understanding. He bowed his head, and when he rose again, the weirwood's carved face seemed to smile. And so began the journey of Bran the Builder, not of war or conquest, but of creation. Yet before stone could rise, the North itself would test him, and men would bleed before they followed his vision. For in the heart of every man lay pride, and pride is harder to shape than any stone. The cold winds were rising again, and in the farthest north, beyond even Bran's dreams, something stirred in the shadows of the snow, watching. The moon rode high and pale above the frozen lands as Bran traveled south from the grove of the weirwoods. The whisper of the old gods still echoed in his mind. To build, you must give. To guard, you must lose. He did not yet know what that meant, but his heart told him that sacrifice would be his shadow before this journey's end. The North in those days was not yet a kingdom, but a wilderness of rival chieftains and scattered clans. The long night had shattered old alliances, and every holdfast stood alone. The strong took what they wished. The weak froze or starved. No lord ruled from Winterfell, for it did not yet exist. The name Stark had never been spoken. Bran came to the valley of the White Knife, where the river cut through hills of frost and pine. There, a small holdfast stood upon a rise, its walls built of timber and earth. The people within were half-starved but wary. They watched him from behind their gates, spears in hand. Their chieftain was a broad man with a tangled beard, his shoulders wrapped in the furs of a snow bear. "I am Edric Snowhand," the man said. "We have little, and we trust less. What brings you, wanderer?" Bran bowed his head. "I seek men willing to build, not to destroy. The cold will come again. I have seen it. And when it comes, no clan will stand alone." Edric gave a rough laugh. "You speak as if the long night were not done. I lost half my kin to that darkness. I will not feed fear again." Bran met his gaze calmly. "You will feed it, or it will feed on you." For a long while the chieftain studied him. Then, without another word, he gestured for the gates to open. Inside the holdfast, Bran saw the toll of hunger and war, broken huts, pale children, and men too thin to lift their axes. He spoke with them through the evening, telling of his dream, of a wall to guard the realms of men, of a fortress where warmth and safety would never fade. Some laughed, some turned away, but a few listened. And among them was Edric's daughter, Lyanna, a woman with fierce eyes and a scar across her cheek. She spoke little, yet when she looked at Bran, he felt as though she could see the truth of him. That night, As the wind rattled the wooden walls, Lyanna came to where Bran sat by the fire. "You truly believe the cold will return?" she asked. "I do," Bran said, "and I believe men will not stand against it unless they stand together." She studied the flames for a long time. "My father will not follow you. He has buried too many to chase dreams." "I do not need him," Bran said softly. "Only those who still believe there is something worth saving." Lyanna's eyes lifted to his. "Then perhaps you should start with me." It was she who guided Bran north once more, through forests where the trees grew black with frost and the air stung the lungs. They found others along the way, broken men, outcasts, hunters, smiths. To each, Bran spoke his vision. Some turned away, fearing madness. Others followed. By the time they reached the shadow of the Frostfangs again, a small band had gathered, men and women bound not by blood, but by hope. In the valley where the wounded giant had died, Bran called them to stand before the cairn of stones. "Here," he said, "was where the old world ended, and here we begin the new." They set to work beneath the winter sun, building shelters and clearing ground. Bran sketched lines in the snow, marking where walls might rise. He spoke often of the wall he had seen in his dreams, a barrier vast as the horizon, forged not merely of ice and stone, but of will. But as their work grew, so too did envy and fear. A man named Herrick, once a chieftain before the long night, began to whisper among the others. "Why should we toil for this boy?" Herrick said. "Who made him lord? He speaks of walls and gods, yet brings us only hunger." Bran tried to reason with him, but Herrick's pride was deep-rooted. He gathered a few to his cause, and one night they stole the food stores and fled south. The snows took them before morning, and their frozen bodies were found days later beneath the trees, eyes open, faces pale as milk. Lyanna said it was justice. Bran said it was a warning. Winter deepened. The sky hung heavy and gray, and their fires burned low. Yet Bran would not yield. He sent hunters to seek the children of the forest, for he knew their magic might yet aid him. Many returned empty-handed, but one morning, as dawn broke red over the mountains, Lyanna returned from the woods with 3 figures no taller than a child, their eyes gold and luminous. The children spoke in whispers like wind through leaves. "The wall you dream of cannot be built by stone alone," one said. "The cold that comes is not of this world. If you would stand against it, you must bind your work with power older than men." Bran listened and learned. Under their guidance, he carved runes into the foundations of their camp, runes that glowed faintly in the night. He mixed crushed dragon glass into the mortar and placed weirwood branches within the walls. Slowly, a fortress began to rise. Not yet Winterfell, but its heart. One night, when snow fell in silence and the air itself seemed to sleep, Bran dreamed again. He stood upon a vast wall of ice, the wind shrieking past. Below him marched figures in black cloaks, and beyond them, through the blizzard, he saw shadows moving, tall and pale and terrible. When he turned, a woman stood beside him, her hair white as frost. "You build to hold them back," she said, "but every wall casts a shadow. What you build to save the world will one day be its burden. Remember that, Bran Stark." He woke with a start. Lyanna slept beside the embers of the fire, her face calm, untroubled. But Bran could not sleep again. The woman's voice still echoed in his ears. Bran Stark. He did not yet bear that name, but the gods had spoken it, and the gods did not speak in jest. Outside, the first true storm of winter began to fall, blanketing the half-built walls in white. Bran went to stand in it, his breath steaming, his eyes upon the horizon. Somewhere beyond that endless cold lay the fate of all men. And before it reached them, he would raise a wall the world would never forget. The storm raged for 7 days and 7 nights, swallowing the camp in endless white. Snow piled upon the half-built walls, and the wind tore at the hides that covered their shelters. Yet Bran would not let his people falter. He moved among them, helping mend roofs, hauling wood, and kindling fire. His hands bled from the cold, but he did not rest. Lyanna watched him with a mixture of admiration and worry. "You drive yourself like a man chased by death," she said one night as the storm howled beyond the firelight. "I am chased," Bran answered, his voice quiet but firm. "Not by death, by what comes before it." She said no more, for she had seen the look in his eyes, that faraway gleam of a man who has glimpsed something greater than himself and can no longer turn aside. When the storm at last broke, the world was silent. The snow lay thick and unbroken, and the trees bent low beneath its weight. Out of the white mist came the giants, 7 of them, vast and terrible, their footsteps shaking the earth. At first, the men of Bran's camp fled in terror, thinking the beasts had come to crush them. But Bran walked forward, unarmed and unafraid. The foremost of the giants was a she-giant, with hair like hoarfrost and eyes like deep blue ice. She looked down upon him and spoke in a voice that rumbled like thunder in a far-off mountain. "You are the boy who helped one of our kin die with honor," she said. "His spirit whispered your name in the wind. Why do you call us here, little man?" Bran knelt in the snow before her. "Because the darkness will come again, and when it does, none shall stand if we stand apart. I would build a wall, a bulwark of stone and ice to hold back the night forever." The giantess tilted her head, her breath misting in the air. "Men build for their pride. Giants build for the song of the earth. What you ask is no small thing." "Then let us build for both," Bran said. There was a long silence, broken only by the groan of the trees. At last, the giantess reached down, her hand as wide as a cart, and set it upon the ground before him. "Then we build," she said, "for the world." From that day forth, the giants worked beside men. Their great hands lifted stones too heavy for any human strength, and their roars shook snow from the mountainsides. The people named the giantess Denna Stonesinger, for her voice could split rock when she chanted. She and her kin followed Bran's guidance, shaping the first foundations of what would one day become the wall. But even as they built, whispers spread among the humans. "He makes pacts with beasts," some said. "He listens to the children and speaks to trees." Fear took root where faith had been. One night, a group of men crept into Bran's tent. They meant to kill him, believing the gods cursed his works. Lyanna awoke first, and her cry brought him to his feet. The struggle was brief but fierce. Blood splattered across the snow, and when it was done, 2 men lay dead. One fled into the dark. Bran stood over their bodies, his face pale as the moonlight. "They were my brothers," he murmured. "We shared bread together." Lyanna cleaned her blade with steady hands. "Then they should have remembered it before they raised steel against you." He looked at her then, truly looked, and saw how the firelight caught the scar upon her cheek, the one she had taken defending him weeks ago. For the first time in many days, Bran felt the ache of being only a man, not a dreamer, not a builder, but a living soul with fears and needs. That night, he did not sleep. Instead, he went to the grove beyond their camp, where a single weirwood stood among the snowdrifts. He knelt before it and whispered to the old gods. "You said I must give," he said, "but what more can I lose?" The wind answered with a sound like a sigh. Beneath the snow, the roots shifted. He thought he heard a voice, faint, almost sorrowful. The world is not built without breaking. To build for all, you must let go of yourself. When dawn came, Bran's decision was made. In the weeks that followed, the building quickened. The children of the forest showed them how to bind ice and stone together with old magic. The giants carved deep channels through the earth, and the humans filled them with packed snow and frozen water until the wall stood higher than any tower. It was not yet the Great Wall of Legend, but it was the beginning, a shimmering barrier that gleamed blue beneath the winter sun. But the darkness they built against was not idle. From the far north came strange tales, villages emptied overnight, tracks in the snow that led nowhere, men found frozen with terror in their eyes. The children whispered that the cold ones were stirring again, though the long night was ended. Then came a day when the sun failed to rise. The sky turned gray and heavy, and an unnatural stillness fell upon the world. Bran stood upon the wall they had built, his furs whipping in the wind. Far off, beyond the horizon, he saw a shape moving through the snow, tall, white, and glimmering faintly with blue fire. "It begins again," said one of the children beside him. Bran's breath steamed in the cold. "Then our wall is not yet high enough." Lyanna came to stand beside him, bow in hand. "We cannot fight what we cannot see," she said. "Tell us what to do." Bran looked down from the wall at the faces turned toward him, men and giants, humans and children, all waiting for his word. For the first time, he felt the weight of what he had begun. "We finish it," he said. "Whatever comes, we build until there is no more stone to set, no more hands to lift it. If the gods demand blood for our work, they shall have mine first." The wind howled like wolves, and the snow began to fall again, thick, endless, and merciless. Yet none turned away. Hammers rang upon ice, voices shouted through the storm, and Bran labored beside them until his hands cracked and bled. Above them, the pale shape moved closer through the white, unseen by all but him. The cold grew deeper, sharper, until even the giants shivered. Still, Bran did not stop. His dream burned within him like a flame against the dark, and as the last stones were set that night, a shudder passed through the world, as though the land itself felt what was being born. The first wall of the north stood tall, defying snow and shadow alike. But in the silence that followed, Bran knew what the voice had meant, for something had been given, and something had been lost. Behind the wall, unseen by the weary builders, Lyanna's eyes closed as she slumped to the ground, an arrow buried deep in her back. The snow drank her blood and turned it black. Bran did not yet know she was gone. He only felt the sudden emptiness, the cold that no fire could chase away. Far beyond, the white figure paused in its march and smiled. Dawn broke pale and soundless upon the world. The storm had passed, yet the silence it left behind was heavier than snow. The wall of ice and stone gleamed blue in the weak sunlight, its shadow stretching long across the frost-bitten earth. The builders stood in weary triumph, their hands raw and their faces hollowed by toil. But Bran's heart was dark, for Lyanna was gone. He found her where the snow lay deepest, half buried beneath white drifts, her bow still clutched in her frozen hands. The wound in her back had bled little. The cold had stolen her life swiftly. Bran knelt beside her, brushing frost from her hair. Her eyes stared upward, unseeing, but peaceful. He had no tears left, only a numbness that cut deeper than grief. The men gathered round in silence. Even the giants bowed their heads. Then a stone singer laid a stone from the mountain upon Lyanna's breast and said, "The earth keeps what it loves." Bran spoke no word, only dug the grave himself, though his fingers bled with each shovelful of snow. When it was done, he stood long beside it, the wind tugging at his cloak, and whispered a vow only the gods could hear. That night, the fire burned low. The children of the forest spoke of strange tracks found near the edge of the woods, of shadows that left no footprints, of cold so sharp it froze breath to glass. Some said the others had come again. Others whispered that the wall itself had angered the gods. Bran said nothing. He sat beside the fire with Lyanna's bow upon his knees, staring into the flames. When at last he spoke, his voice was quiet, but carried through the camp. "We have built the beginning of the wall," he said, "but it is not yet enough. The dark will return, and when it does, this small rampart will not hold. We must build higher, higher than any tree, higher than the sky itself if we can." Herrick's brother, a man named Cregan, rose to his feet. "You would have us build until we freeze where we stand. We've lost too much already." Bran met his eyes. "Then you may go, but the cold will find you all the same." No one left. Even fear could not move them now. They had seen what Bran had seen, the strange lights beyond the northern horizon, the shadows that crept when no sun shone. And so they worked again. Days turned to weeks, and weeks to moons. The wall climbed skyward, stone upon stone, ice upon ice. The giants sang as they worked, their voices deep and slow, shaping the rhythm of labor. The children wove spells into the foundation, whispering to the frozen earth. Under their hands, the barrier became more than mere craft. It became legend. Bran no longer slept as other men did. His dreams were filled with whispers, faces half seen through mist, and the sound of wings beating against the storm. Often he would wake to find frost upon his lashes, though no snow had fallen. He began to see things others could not. The glimmer of light where none should be, the trace of movement within the ice. One night, as he stood upon the unfinished height of the wall, a shadow moved in the snow below. It was tall and slender, cloaked in white so pure it seemed carved from frost. The figure looked up at him, and though its face was hidden, Bran felt the chill of recognition. "You build," the figure said, its voice thin as wind over glass. "But what you build belongs to us." Bran's breath misted in the cold. "The wall belongs to all who live. You will not cross it." The figure tilted its head. "All walls fall, even yours." And then it was gone, vanished into the storm. When morning came, Bran told no one. He only ordered the work to go faster. He drove himself and his people to exhaustion, as if haste alone could hold back fate. The giants muttered that the stones themselves were weary. The children warned him that the wall's magic must be woven slowly, or it would crack. But Bran did not listen. He had seen the shadow. He knew time was running thin. Then a stone singer came to him at sunset. "Little man," she said, "your heart is bleeding, and you would mend it with stone, but hearts do not heal that way." Bran stared at the horizon, where the light of day was fading. "If I stop, all this dies with me." "Perhaps," she rumbled, "but even the strongest wall needs rest between stones." That night, Bran went walking among the camps. The fires burned low, and the air smelled of smoke and pine. He heard men murmuring prayers to strange gods, saw the children tracing runes into the frost. The wall loomed above, a mountain of blue ice against the stars. It was beautiful and terrible. He stopped beside Lyanna's grave. The snow had covered it, but he could still see the shape of the stone Denna had laid. He touched it lightly, his fingers numb. "I cannot stop," he whispered. "I will not stop." The wind shifted. For a moment, he thought he heard her voice, faint, like a sigh. "Then build, Bran, but remember what must be paid." He turned, but there was only snow. The following morning, they began the final stretch of the wall. The giants lifted ice blocks taller than men. The children chanted, binding them with magic older than the world. The air shimmered with light, green and gold like the dawn. When the last stone was set, the wall rose so high its top vanished into mist. It was done. As the builders stood in awe, Bran stepped forward. He placed his hand upon the cold surface and whispered words that came to him unbidden, words in a tongue older than the first men. The ice beneath his palm glowed faintly, then stilled. A great stillness fell. Even the wind ceased. Denna Stonesinger bowed her head. "It is finished." But Bran felt no triumph. He felt only emptiness. The vision that had driven him was fulfilled, and yet something within him knew the task was not truly ended. The cold would come again. The wall would not stand forever. That night, as the fires burned low, the children came to him one last time. "You have built your shield," said their leader, a small being with eyes like molten gold. "Now the North will need a heart, a home to remember why it must endure." Bran frowned. "A home? Stone alone cannot guard the living," the child said. "You must build a place of warmth, where the line of men may endure when winter comes again." Bran looked southward, where the land rolled in long waves of snow and forest. He saw in his mind a hill, crowned with hot springs that steamed through the cold. He saw halls rising, fires burning, banners flying in the wind. "Yes," he said softly, "a place to remember." And so it was that the dream of Winterfell was born. As he turned to go, the wall shone faintly behind him, vast and unmoving. But from far beyond its northern face, where no living thing dared tread, something stirred. Ice cracked, shadows walked, and though Bran did not see them, he felt their gaze upon his back, cold as the grave and patient as time. Winter's heart had quieted for a time, and the winds that once shrieked like lost spirits softened into murmuring sighs that rustled through the pine and snow. The wall, vast and glimmering, stretched from the frozen sea in the west to the shadowed highlands of the east. It was a marvel unlike anything the world had seen. Half magic, half stone, bound together by the blood and will of men, giants, and the children of the forest. Yet Bran felt no peace in its presence. The stillness it brought was uneasy, as though the land itself held its breath, waiting. When the first thaw came, he gathered his people. The builders, hunters, smiths, and singers stood in a great circle before the wall. Their faces were lean from hunger and labor, yet there was pride in their eyes. Bran spoke to them as the cold mist drifted between them. "You have done what no others dared," he said. "The wall stands, and with it, the hope of men. But a wall is not a kingdom, nor can it warm the heart in winter's long night. We have built our shield. Now we must build our hearth." The giants listened in silence, their vast shapes looming behind the crowd. Denna Stonesinger stood beside him, her deep voice low. "You would build again so soon?" "Yes," Bran said, "but this time not for defense, for life." They followed him south through forests blackened by frost and hills veiled in morning fog. The rivers ran thick and slow, carrying the last shards of winter's ice. Days passed into weeks as they crossed the wild country that lay between the frost fangs and the heart of the north. Everywhere they went, Bran saw the scars of the long night, villages long abandoned, cairns of the dead, and trees that had never grown again after the great darkness. At last, they came upon a wide valley surrounded by hills. The earth there was dark and fertile, and from the ground rose pillars of white steam that curled into the cold air. When Bran set foot upon the hill at its center, warmth spread beneath the snow. He knelt, brushing frost aside, and the earth breathed, hot and living. "This is the place," he said softly. "Here the fire sleeps beneath the frost. Here we shall build a hall that will never fall cold." The giants tested the ground, thudding their great fists against the earth. Denna smiled, her teeth flashing pale as bone. "The mountain beneath sings," she said. "It is old fire, deep fire. You have chosen well." The work began anew. The men who had built the wall now raised halls of stone, carving deep foundations into the hill. The hot springs they channeled through the walls so that warmth would ever flow through the heart of the hall. The children of the forest wove their songs into the stone, calling upon the old gods to bless the earth. The days grew longer, the snows receding from the valleys, and for a while, the builders laughed again. They hunted in the woods, caught trout in the rivers, and sang around the fires at night. Yet even in peace, Bran could not sleep easily. His dreams were full of snow and whispers, of a white shadow gliding beyond the wall. One evening, as dusk painted the sky in violet and gold, Denna Stonesinger came to him. "Your mind is restless," she said. "Even when your hands are still, your thoughts build." "I dreamed of the wall again," Bran confessed. There was a crack in it, running from crown to base. Through it, the cold seeped like breath. I tried to seal it, but my hands froze fast to the ice. Denna rumbled softly, neither laughter nor sorrow. "Walls keep out and keep in. You cannot mend both sides." He turned to her, frowning. "What do you mean?" "The wall holds more than cold," she said. "When you bound it with song and blood, you bound what lived beyond it as well. Ice remembers, magic remembers. So long as it stands, both sides are chained." Bran felt a chill run through him despite the warm air. "Then we have trapped them?" "For a time," Denna said. "But time breaks all chains." She looked toward the horizon, where the wall glimmered faintly even from leagues away. "You have given the world an age of peace, little man. Be content with that." Bran wanted to believe her. He tried to lose himself in the work, in the shaping of stone, in the laying of hearths, in the songs sung by tired builders. Slowly, the hall rose from the earth, 7 great towers encircling a courtyard, and beneath it, chambers warmed by the hot springs that ran deep below. When the roof was set upon the great hall, Bran gathered his people once more. The banners of each clan that had survived were hung upon the walls. The direwolf of Bran's own kin, the bear of the Snow Hands, the hammer of the Frostborn. Denna placed a single stone from the wall itself in the hearth, so that the old strength would live in the new. Bran lifted his cup. "Let this place stand as long as men draw breath," he said. "Let it be a beacon of warmth when the cold returns. We name it Winterfell, for here winter shall fall, and yet men shall rise again." A cheer went up, echoing through the hall and out into the night. But Bran's smile was thin. In the firelight, the faces of his people seemed distant, flickering, like ghosts caught between life and legend. That night, when all others slept, he walked alone through the silent corridors. The air hummed faintly with warmth from the springs below, but it did not reach his heart. He climbed the stairs to the tower's crown and looked north. The sky there shimmered with faint green light, the ghostly ribbons of the aurora dancing over the wall, And there, beyond the flickering glow, he saw them, tall and still, like pillars of ice in the dark. Dozens, perhaps hundreds, standing silent upon the far side of the wall, watching. Bran gripped the cold stone of the parapet. "Stay," he whispered. "Stay behind what we've made." But deep within, he knew the wall was no ending, only a delay. He thought of Lyanna's voice, of the weirwood's whisper. To build, you must give. To guard, you must lose. He had given, and lost, and built, yet something within him stirred, uneasy, as though the gods themselves were not done with him. When dawn came, he called Denna Stonesinger to the gates. "You must lead your kin north again," he told her. "The giants have no home here. The land of men is not made for your kind." She studied him for a long moment. "And what of you?" "I will remain," he said. "Winterfell is my oath." Denna's blue eyes gleamed like frozen stars. "Then may your stones outlast your heart." She turned without another word, and the giants began their long march north, their shadows stretching across the snow. Bran watched them go until they vanished into the white horizon. The world seemed smaller without them. As the years turned and the first snows returned to the hills, Winterfell's walls grew strong. Children were born within its halls, fires burned bright, and songs were sung of Bran the Builder, the boy who raised the wall and made a home where warmth never faded. Yet sometimes, on the stillest nights, when the wind sighed through the towers, the servants swore they heard footsteps far below, faint, echoing, as though someone walked deep beneath the earth. And in the Godswood, the face of the weirwood seemed to smile, though none could say whether it was in blessing or in warning. The first true winter after the founding of Winterfell came soft and early, with gentle flakes that drifted like ash upon the roofs and the fields. The valley slept beneath a white veil, peaceful and untroubled. Yet Bran Stark felt unease stirring like a restless spirit beneath the calm. He had grown older, his hair now dark as raven's wings, streaked with the frost of long labor. The people called him Lord of Winterfell, though he had never claimed the title for himself. He was still the builder, still the dreamer of walls and halls. Yet now, when he walked the courtyards, children bowed their heads and whispered stories behind him, stories that already made him something other than a man. At night, he sat alone by the fire in the great hall, Lyanna's bow mounted above the hearth, and the whisper of the weirwoods in his ears. His dreams were troubled. He saw the wall stretching north and south until it curved around the world. He saw shadows moving beyond it, pale riders with eyes like stars, and he saw Winterfell itself buried under endless snow, its towers frozen, its hearths cold. When he woke, his hands were cold as ice. On the first morning of the deep snow, a rider came from the north, half dead, his face blackened with frostbite. He fell from his horse before the gates and gasped out his tale before dying in the snow. He spoke of lights in the far distance, blue and cold, and of shapes that moved in silence across the white fields. Bran listened without a word. When the body was taken away, he stood a long time staring north. At last he said, "The wall holds, but the world beyond it stirs. We must be ready." He summoned his captains and hunters and began to plan. They repaired the armory and forged spears tipped with dragon glass from the shards he had long kept safe. The children of the forest had taught him how to shape them once. Now, under his command, the black stone was cut and set into weapons of war. The men muttered that he prepared for ghosts, but they obeyed. Weeks passed, and the cold deepened. The rivers froze to their beds, and the hot springs steamed thick and heavy in the still air. The howling of wolves came nightly from the forests. Yet no new messenger arrived from the north. One evening, as Bran stood upon the battlements, a strange cry echoed from the woods, high, mournful, and not of any beast he knew. He turned to the guards. "Open the gate." They hesitated, but he repeated the order, and the great oak doors creaked wide. Through the falling snow came a small band, cloaked figures, moving slowly, their forms bent with exhaustion. At their head walked a child of the forest, her golden eyes dull with weariness. Bran descended to meet them. "Leave," he said, for that was what she had once called herself in the old tongue. "Why do you come south?" "The wall holds," she said, "but the shadows grow strong. The others have woken fully. They seek the old magics, the songs we buried long ago. They will not rest until all is frozen once more." Bran's face hardened. "Then we must hold the realms of men as long as we can." Leif's gaze lingered on him. "The wall you built binds more than them, Bran Stark. Its magic ties your blood to its keeping. The day it falls, so too will your line." He felt the truth of it in his bones, though he wished he did not. "Then my line shall not end," he said. Leif nodded once, sorrow in her ancient eyes. "Then let it be so." She stayed the night, but when dawn came, she was gone. Only her footprints remained, already fading beneath new snow. In the weeks that followed, the valley lay under gray skies. The people of Winterfell carried on their days, hunting, mending, tending the fires, yet an unspoken dread lay over them. Sometimes they swore they heard faint noises in the night, like the sound of far-off horns carried by the wind. Then, one bitter morning, the wall itself sang. A low, groaning sound rolled across the frozen land, deep as thunder. The air trembled. Bran felt it through the stones of Winterfell, through his bones. He knew that cry. It was the sound of the ice shifting, as if something vast had struck from the far side. He mounted his horse and rode north with a dozen men. The journey took days through deep drifts and white silence. When at last they reached the wall, they saw no sign of battle, but the ice bore long cracks, spidering across its surface like veins of glass. Bran stood at its base, his gloved hand pressed to the frozen surface. "It is not broken," he murmured, "but it is waking." That night, they camped beside the wall. The wind howled from the north, biting through fur and leather. In the firelight, Bran dreamed. He walked upon the wall, higher than the clouds, and beneath him stretched an endless plain of snow. The stars shone blue and sharp. From the farthest horizon, the darkness moved, a great wave of cold, glittering with faint lights, endless and silent. Behind him, Winterfell burned, its flames swallowed by frost. He turned and saw a woman of ice standing where Lyanna once had stood in his dreams. Her eyes were pale as frozen moonlight. "You cannot build against death," she said. "You can only delay it." When he woke, the fire had gone out. Snow had covered the camp, and the wind cut through every seam of his cloak. His men slept fitfully, murmuring in their dreams. Bran rose, heart hammering. The wall loomed pale in the dim light, vast and still, yet he felt something stirring within it, like breath behind a closed door. They returned to Winterfell before the next moon. The people greeted them with joy, but Bran did not speak of what he had seen. Instead, he began to teach. He called the sons of the builders, the hunters, and the chieftains, and he taught them the old ways of stone and fire, of forging and fighting. "Winter will always return," he told them, When it does, our walls must not fall. Remember what was built and why. He took a wife in those years, a woman named Alara, fierce and fair, with hair dark as midnight and a spirit unbroken by cold. From her he found peace for a time, and in her he saw the same light he had once seen in Lyanna's eyes. Together they bore a son, the first of his line. Bran named him Rickon, after the first man who had ever sworn to follow him. When the boy was born, the weirwood in the godswood shivered though no wind blew, and the hot springs roared louder beneath the earth. As the child grew, Bran would take him to the wall and show him the endless white beyond. There lies the memory of death, he would say, and here life must endure. Rickon would nod solemnly, though he was but a child, and stare at the great wall with awe. "Will it fall, father?" he asked once. Bran smiled faintly, though his eyes were shadowed. "Not in my time," he said. And yet, on some nights, he would wake to the sound of faint cracking, far away, deep in the distance, as though the ice itself whispered reminders that nothing man built could last forever. So the seasons turned. The snows came and went. The herds grew fat in summer and lean in winter, and the people of Winterfell thrived. The tales of Bran the Builder spread through every hall and village, until he was less a man than a myth. But north of the wall, where the stars burned cold and strange, the shadows gathered again, not yet ready to march, but watching, patient, eternal. And in the heart of Winterfell, the weirwood smiled beneath its red leaves, its sap running dark and slow, as if it too remembered the cost of what had been built. Years rolled like slow rivers beneath the snow, and the tale of Bran the Builder became a song sung by hearthfire. The men of the north called him Lord, though he wore no crown, and they called Winterfell the heart of their world. From the wall to the neck, the wild country bent its knee to the blood of the builder, and for the first time since the long night, the north knew peace. But peace is a fragile thing. It holds only so long as men remember fear. Bran grew gray before his time, though his strength remained. His son Rickon had become a youth of bright eyes and bold heart, skilled with the bow and the hammer both. Alara, Bran's wife, ruled beside him with quiet wisdom, loved by high and low alike. Yet even in the warmth of their hall, shadows gathered beyond their walls. One winter's eve, as snow began to fall in soft silence, a horn sounded from the northern road. A company of riders approached, weary and frostbitten, their leader cloaked in black fur trimmed with silver. He bore no banner, only a look of grim urgency. When Bran welcomed them into his hall, the man bowed low before the fire. "I am Tormund of the Frostfang Vale," he said. "I bring word from the wall." At the mention of that name, the hall fell still. The wall had stood silent for years, its watchers few and untroubled. Bran leaned forward. "Speak, then." "The cracks are spreading," Tormund said. "We keep watch as you ordered, my lord. But there are sounds now, deep and hollow, as though the ice itself speaks. One of our sentries vanished 3 nights past. Another found his footprints leading north, and no prints returning." A chill touched the back of Bran's neck. He had known this would come, though he had prayed the years would outlast him. He dismissed the hall and walked with Tormund to the godswood. The great weirwood stood silent beneath a coat of snow, its red leaves drooping like bloodied hands. The hot spring nearby steamed faintly in the cold air. "Tell me truthfully," Bran said. "Do your men still see lights beyond the wall?" "Aye," Tormund said quietly. "Blue and white, like stars caught in mist. Sometimes they move. Sometimes they simply watch." Bran stared north, though the wall was leagues away. Then the spell weakens, he murmured. That night, sleep fled from him. He walked the halls of Winterfell alone, listening to the sigh of the springs beneath the stone. When he passed the nursery, he paused. Rickon slept soundly within, his dark hair spread upon the pillow, his small hand curled around a wooden wolf. Bran's heart ached to see him so peaceful, knowing the world's peace was never long. In the days that followed, Bran called a council of his bannermen. The Snow Hands, the Frostborn, the Ice Cloaks, and others came, their banners fluttering in the cold wind. In the great hall, beneath the carved beams, Bran spoke of what stirred beyond the wall. The cold does not die, he said. It sleeps in dreams. The cracks upon the wall are dreams waking. Many frowned, uneasy. Some whispered that their lord had grown old and too bound to his own fears. But Alara rose beside him and said, "When darkness comes, it does not knock upon the gate. It slips beneath it. We will stand ready." The council agreed to send men north to strengthen the watchtowers and repair the breaches. Rickon begged his father to let him go among them, eager for adventure, but Bran refused. "Your duty is here," he said. "A Stark must always remain where the hearth burns." That night, father and son stood upon the walls of Winterfell. Snow drifted in the moonlight, silvering the stones. "Father," Rickon asked, "do you think the wall will fall one day?" Bran looked north, his eyes distant. "All things fall, my son. The measure of a house is whether it rises again." The boy was silent a while, then nodded solemnly. "Then I will rise if I must." Bran rested a hand upon his shoulder. "And so you shall." Winter deepened, the rivers froze, and the herds were driven to shelter. The wall loomed silent and cold, yet the cracks grew. One night, a rider brought word. The northern watchtower had collapsed into ruin, taking 10 men with it. Bran went to the Godswood again. The air smelled of frost and sap. He knelt before the weirwood and pressed his palm to its bark. The old gods did not speak, but he felt something stir within the roots, a faint pulse, as if the earth itself were troubled. The next morning, he summoned Rickon. "It is time you saw what your forefather built," he said. "You will ride with me to the wall." The journey north was long and bitter. Snow fell without pause, and the wind bit like knives. When at last they reached the wall, the men of the watch came forth to greet them. Gaunt faces, hollow eyes, wrapped in furs patched and worn. The cracks were worse than Bran had feared. Great fissures veined the ice, spreading like webs across its face. Rickon stared in awe. "It is so vast," he whispered, "and so cold." Bran touched the ice. Beneath his hand he felt movement, slow, patient, alive. "It remembers everything that touches it," he said. "Stone forgets, but ice does not." That night, they camped at the base of the wall. The fire burned low, casting long shadows. Bran could not sleep. He walked beyond the circle of light and looked up at the towering barrier. The stars glimmered faintly above it, but within its depths, he thought he saw something else. Faint blue lights flickering far below, deep inside the ice. He stepped closer. A whisper rose from within, soft, like the crackling of frost. His name, Bran. He stumbled back, breath freezing in his throat. The wall groaned once, deep and long, as if it exhaled. Then all was still again. At dawn, they found the northern face fractured anew. Bran ordered repairs, though he knew it would not be enough. He returned south with Rickon, his heart heavy. When they reached Winterfell, Alara met them at the gate. "You have seen it," she said, her eyes dark with fear. "I have," Bran answered. and I know now what must be done." That night, in the Godswood, he stood once more before the weirwood. The wind stirred the branches, and the face upon the trunk seemed to watch him with ancient sorrow. "I have built," Bran said. "I have given, and I have lost. But the world turns, and the cold waits. Tell me, what more must I do?" The whisper came, faint as a sigh through snow. "Blood for blood. The wall for the world. One must bind what stone cannot." Bran bowed his head, understanding at last. The next morning, he gathered his family and his people. "A Stark's duty does not end with life," he said. "We are the watch that never sleeps. The wall was not built for one age, but for all." That evening, he went alone to the crypts beneath Winterfell, carrying only his sword and a lantern. He descended until even the sound of the springs was gone, until the air was still and cold as the grave. There, before the empty tomb that would one day bear his name, Bran Stark knelt and whispered a final prayer. The fire dimmed, and the shadows closed around him. When the guards found him the next morning, he sat as if asleep, his hand resting upon the stone wolf carved above his tomb. His eyes were open, and in them burned the faintest glimmer of blue, like the heart of winter itself. From that day, the North said that Bran the Builder's spirit had passed into the wall, that his blood and breath now bound it from within, and as long as the wall stood, so too did his name. But far to the north, beneath the frozen wastes, something old stirred once more. The ice cracked like thunder, and in the stillness after, a whisper rode the wind. The Builder watches, the cold remembers. The snows lay deep that year, blanketing all the north in silence. Ravens flew southward with tidings of Bran the Builder's death, and across the frozen lands, men wept and drank to his name. They said the gods had taken him back into the wall, that his soul would watch over them forever. In Winterfell, the hot springs hissed like sighing ghosts, and the weirwood's red eyes wept sap for 7 days and 7 nights. Rickon Stark was but a young man when his father passed, but already the bearing of leadership had settled upon him. He stood beside Alara before the tomb of Bran the Builder, where the first stone wolf watched with eternal vigilance. The hall was filled with lords and clansmen, the snow hands, the frostborn, the men of the barrows and the hills. When silence fell, Rickon spoke. "My father gave his life to bind the cold," he said, his voice clear as the winter air. "His blood guards the wall, his name guards the north. From this day, we keep his vow. There must always be a Stark in Winterfell." The lords struck their chests and bowed their heads, and so it was written. Years passed, and the wall still stood, vast and gleaming beneath the pale sun, an unmoving monument to the Builder's will. Yet even as peace returned to the valleys and the rivers thawed once more, unease lingered like a shadow. The people of the north said the wall whispered at night. Some claimed to hear Bran's voice within it, low and mournful, as if he spoke to the wind itself. Others said they saw faint blue fire burning deep inside the ice. Rickon grew into a lord of steady hand and sharp mind. He loved the hunt, the forge, and the sound of laughter in the hall. But more than any of these, he loved to walk the Godswood at dusk, when the air was still and the hot springs steamed through the roots of the weirwood. There he would sit upon the stone bench his father had carved and speak softly, as though Bran could still hear him. One such evening, as the sun sank and the sky blazed with orange fire, a raven came down from the north. Its feathers were white with frost, and its eyes gleamed like chips of black glass. Rickon untied the message bound to its leg. his fingers trembling as he read. The wall hums with cold. The cracks widen. Come. He did not wait for morning. Within the hour, he gathered his most trusted men, Sir Alaric Snowhand, Theon Frostborn, and a dozen riders besides. Alara begged him not to go, but he only smiled and kissed her brow. "I must see the wall again," he said. "If my father's spirit stirs, I will be there to hear it." They rode through the night, their torches flickering in the wind. The land seemed hushed, as if holding its breath. When dawn came pale and weak, the wall rose before them, higher than mountains, shimmering faintly with veins of pale blue. But something was wrong. The ice no longer glowed with the steady strength of old. It pulsed, faintly, like a heart beneath skin. Rickon dismounted, staring up. "It lives," he murmured. One of the watchmen came running. "My lord, you should not be here." "The wall. It speaks." "Show me," Rickon said. They led him to the western watchtower, where the cracks ran deepest. The ice there seemed to breathe, expanding and contracting with slow rhythm, a sound like wind moaning through hollow bones. When Rickon pressed his hand to it, he felt warmth for the briefest moment, warmth and sorrow. He heard his father's voice. The cold stirs. "Hold fast." Rickon staggered back, heart hammering. "Did you hear it?" he asked his men, but they only looked at him in confusion. None had heard a thing. That night, he dreamed of Bran, standing upon the wall, cloaked in shadow and snow. His eyes glowed with faint blue light, not cruel, but weary. "The wall weakens," the dream Bran said. "The magic fades with my blood. You must renew it, Rickon. The wall remembers blood." "How?" Rickon demanded. "Tell me what to do." But Bran only looked toward the horizon. "Winter comes again. The north must always stand. A Stark must always be in Winterfell." Then the dream dissolved, and Rickon woke to the sound of cracking ice. At dawn, they found that part of the western face had fallen away. A sheer cliff of ice collapsed into ruin. No one had seen it fall. It had simply broken, clean and deep, as though something within had stirred and pushed outward. Rickon ordered the breach sealed, but the men labored in vain. Every night the cracks spread anew. Strange lights flickered within the depths, cold and blue, and sometimes faint shapes moved behind the ice, shadows that were not men. After a fortnight, Rickon rode south again. When he reached Winterfell, Alara ran to meet him, her face pale with worry. "You've seen it," she said. "The wall weakens." He nodded. "It does more than weaken. It breathes." That night, as snow fell soft upon the roofs, Rickon gathered the maesters, the priests, and the old woodwalkers who still knew the ways of the children. He asked them what might be done to bind magic anew. Some spoke of blood sacrifices, others of runes carved in dragon glass, but none knew the secret that Bran had carried to his grave. In desperation, Rickon went to the Godswood. The weirwood's red eyes glimmered in the moonlight, and steam rose from the springs in ghostly plumes. He knelt and pressed his hand to the roots. "Father," he whispered, "if you dwell within the wall, give me a sign. Tell me how to save what you built." The branches stirred though no wind blew. The face in the bark seemed to shift, its carved mouth opening just slightly. A voice, faint as if carried from far beneath the earth, whispered back, "Blood for blood, the wall for the living." Rickon bowed his head. He understood. The wall's strength was bound to the life of the builder, and that life had waned. To renew it, the blood of his line must be given again. He said nothing to Alara. He only held her that night, longer than usual, and told her to keep their son close and warm. When dawn came, he rode north once more. At the base of the wall, the wind howled like wolves. Rickon dismounted and dismissed his men. Alone, he walked to the breach and laid his hand upon the ice. "I am of your blood," he said softly. "Let my life bind yours again." The cold bit deep. For a heartbeat, he felt something pull. A vast weight, ancient and hungry. Then the world flashed white. When the light faded, Rickon was gone. Only his cloak lay upon the snow, and the wall stood whole once more, seamless, unbroken, gleaming in the pale sun. Those who found it knelt and wept. The watchers carved his name beside his father's upon the wall's base. Rickon Stark, the blood of the builder. In Winterfell, Alara felt the ground tremble beneath her feet. The hot springs hissed like steam from a wound, and the weirwood's branches shook though the air was still. She knew then what he had done. That night, she told her young son, Edric, barely old enough to walk, the tale. "Your father and his father guard the wall," she said. "They stand watch for all of us. So long as a Stark draws breath, the North shall not fall." And from that day forth, when storms howled beyond the wall, the watchers swore they heard voices in the wind, 2 of them, low and steady, murmuring through the snow. "Hold fast. The North remembers." Winter's years moved like a slow heartbeat, heavy and ceaseless. The wall gleamed once more, whole and strong, yet the men who guarded it whispered that it sometimes shuddered in the night, as though something vast beneath its heart turned in restless dreams. From Eastwatch to the Shadow Tower, the songs of Bran and Rickon were sung beside every fire, and the name of Stark became a prayer as much as a bloodline. At Winterfell, Alara Stark ruled in widowhood. Her hair had turned the color of snow, yet her eyes were keen as ever. She ruled not with sword or fear, but with the steady wisdom of one who had loved a builder and given him to the gods. Under her care, the land grew fertile again. The harvests returned, and the wolves of the forests kept far from the villages. But she knew well that peace was only ever the pause between storms. Her son, Edric Stark, grew tall and restless, a youth of 17 with the steel of his father and the spirit of his grandsire. He trained in the yard until his sword sang, and spent his nights walking the battlements, staring north where the horizon was swallowed by snow. The wall called to him, as it had called to all his line. One winter's eve, when the moon shone cold and bright, he found his mother alone in the godswood. The steam of the hot springs curled around her like mist. She stood before the weirwood, her hand upon its trunk. "Mother," he said quietly, "I had a dream." Her gaze turned to him, soft but wary. "All Stark's dream, my son." "Not like this," he said. "I was upon the wall, and I saw a host moving beneath the ice. Pale figures, thousands of them, trapped but not dead. They turned their faces toward me, and I knew them. I knew father among them." Alara's face did not change, though her hand tightened on the weirwood's bark. "The dead have their rest, Edric. Do not seek to disturb them." "But they were not resting," he said. "They whispered. They said the wall remembers. They said, it hungers." For a long while she said nothing. Then, in a low voice, "Your father's blood binds the wall as your grandsire's did before him. That binding does not come without cost. It draws upon the life it protects, upon our line." Edric frowned. "Then our blood feeds the wall." "In part," she said. "It is the old magic, the blood magic of the first men and the children. The Starks are tied to it forever. So long as we endure, the wall endures. So long as the wall stands, the north is safe." He was silent a moment. "And if one day the wall fails?" Her gaze drifted toward the frozen north. "Then no king's crown, no southern sword will save the world of men." After that night, Edric began to dream more often. Dreams of the frozen sea, of forests where snow fell upward into the sky, of whispers that called his name from beneath the ice. And always, behind it all, the same faint pulse, like the beating of a heart, vast and slow, deep beneath the wall. Years passed. Alara grew frail, and the weight of rule fell upon Edric's shoulders. He became Lord of Winterfell at 23, and the lords of the north swore fealty to him with roaring cheers. Yet even as they feasted in his honor, Edric's thoughts lingered on the edge of the world. That winter was colder than any in memory. Rivers froze solid to their beds, and wolves came howling down from the woods in packs. Travelers spoke of strange lights seen above the wall, green and gold and cold blue. Some said it was only the play of the aurora. Others swore it was the work of spirits. Then, one morning, a raven came from Castle Black. Its wings were rimed with frost, its eyes blind with ice. The message tied to its leg was written in a hand that trembled. "The ice is bleeding. The wall cries. Send aid." Edric gathered his bannermen at once. Against his mother's pleas, he swore to ride north and see the truth with his own eyes. "The blood of my house binds that wall," he said. "If it cries, it is my duty to answer." 300 men rode with him through snow and silence. For 10 days they fought wind and frost, and when at last they reached the Shadow Tower, the sight froze even the bravest among them. The wall bled. From high above, a dark stream ran down its face, thick and slow, staining the snow black as ink. The ice beneath their boots thrummed faintly, like something alive. The watchmen looked hollow-eyed, and none would go near the flow. Edric approached alone. He touched his gloved hand to the black ice, and flinched. It was warm. "Lord," said one of the men, voice shaking. "What is it?" He did not answer. Deep within the ice, faint shapes moved. Not shadows, not light, but something between. He thought he saw his father's face for an instant, then his grandfather's, both pale and still. That night, Edric could not sleep. He walked the wall's base until moonrise, and when at last he looked up, he saw something high above him, a figure standing upon the crest of the wall, dark against the stars. It raised one hand, and the bleeding ceased. He blinked, and it was gone. When dawn came, the black streak was frozen solid, gleaming like obsidian in the morning light. The cracks had sealed. The watchmen cheered, calling it a miracle. But Edric felt only dread, for as the wall stilled, he felt a sharp pain behind his eyes, and when he wiped his brow, his hand came away red with blood. He said nothing to his men. When they rode back to Winterfell, he walked the battlements alone each night, feeling the same slow pulse in his veins that he had once felt in the wall. One night, Alara found him staring north. "You felt it," she said. He nodded. "The wall bleeds no more because I do. The bond passes from father to son." Tears glimmered in her eyes. "Then the wall will hold as long as you do, my son. But when your time comes," he finished her words softly, "another Stark must be ready to bleed." Alara placed a hand upon his cheek. "The world forgets the old gods. The South will call us cold and cruel. But remember this, warmth is a gift paid for in blood, and ours has been paying since the dawn." The years that followed were quiet, though not gentle. Edric Stark ruled wisely, and under his hand the North prospered even through the longest winters. His wife Mara bore him 3 children, Torrin, Brandon, and Sansa, whose laughter was said to make the wolves still their howls. Yet, in the depth of night, when the fires burned low, Edric would sometimes wake gasping, his skin rimed with frost, hearing the faint whisper of the wall calling his name. He never spoke of it, not to his wife, not even to the maester who found him standing barefoot in the snow one dawn, staring northward with blue eyes clouded as ice. And so, though peace returned and the years turned kind, the truth lingered unspoken in Winterfell's halls. The wall still lived, the blood still bound it, and the builder's price had not yet been paid in full. For beyond the wall, in the far frozen wastes where the aurora danced like green fire, the others stirred once more. Their eyes burned pale and endless, their voices carried on the wind, and when they whispered to the cold earth, it was not the name of gods or kings they spoke. It was a single word, carried south across the snow: Stark. The seasons rolled onward, slow and merciless, as they ever had in the north. The rivers froze, thawed, and froze again, and the people of Winterfell endured as they always did, their hearts strong as iron beneath the cold. The wall still stood, vast and shimmering, a mountain of frozen blue under the watch of heaven. Yet though no mortal eye could see it, its heart pulsed faintly with power, the power of Stark blood, ancient and unbroken. Lord Edric Stark grew older, his hair fading to iron gray, his gaze colder than the snows that blanketed his land. He was no longer the fiery youth who had ridden north to mend the bleeding wall. He had become something quieter, harder, as though the years themselves had shaped him from ice. The Maesters said the old gods favored him. The small folk whispered that he could speak to the wall in his dreams. At his side ruled Lady Mara, whose beauty had not withered but sharpened like frost upon a blade. She bore him 3 children, and though she feared for her husband's silences, she loved him fiercely. Their eldest, Torrin, was heir. Tall and fair, strong with sword and shield, Brandon, the second son, was restless and curious, his eyes forever on the horizon. And the youngest, Sansa, was gentle, her laughter like sunlight breaking through snow clouds. Under their father's rule, the North prospered. Winterfell's fires burned warm, its granaries full, its people steadfast. Yet the shadow of the wall lay long across the years, and the whisper of the cold winds was never far. One night, the maester brought a raven from Castle Black. Its feathers were rimed with frost, and its eyes gleamed faintly blue. The message was short, the ink smudged by trembling hands. There are lights again beyond the frost fangs, pale riders in the storm, the old dead walk. Edric read it once, then burned it. For 3 days he said nothing. He walked the walls of Winterfell in silence, his eyes turned always north. When at last he called his sons before him, his voice was grave. Torrin, you will take 50 men and ride to the wall. Bring back truth, not tales. Brandon frowned. And if the truth is worse than tales? Then you will ride back faster, Edric said. Torrin left that night, his sword gleaming under the moon, his banner snapping in the wind. Brandon watched him go with envy and dread in equal measure. He had his father's hunger for the unknown, but also his mother's fear of what waited in the dark. The days that followed were still, too still. The ravens brought no word. Snow began to fall again, thick and heavy, burying the fields in silence. And then, on the 7th night, the dogs began to howl. From the forests came riders, 2 men, their cloaks torn and their faces hollow with frost. They collapsed before the gates, too weak to speak. When they were brought inside, Edric knelt beside them, his heart already knowing. "Where is my son?" he asked. One of the men tried to speak, his lips cracked with cold. "The wall. Broken," he rasped. "They came. Out of it. Shadows. White shadows. They took him, my lord. They took him alive." Alive. The word struck like an axe. Edric rose without a sound. The men of the north looked to him, waiting for orders, but none came. He went instead to the godswood, where the weirwood's face glimmered red and pale in the torchlight. There he knelt and whispered to the roots. "Is this my punishment?" he said. "Have I given too little? Too much?" The weirwood did not answer. Only the steam of the springs coiled around him, and the wind carried a faint, distant sound, the echo of a horn, blowing low and mournful across the northern plains. That night, he dreamt of the wall again. He stood upon its crest, the storm screaming around him, and below he saw an army of pale figures stretching from horizon to horizon. At their head rode his son Torren, his eyes burning blue, his voice cold as death. "Father," the Dream Torren said, "the wall remembers blood. You cannot bind what you do not feed." When Edric woke, the fire was dead. The air stank of frost. At dawn, he called for Brandon. "Your brother is gone," he said simply, "but not lost. There is a bond between the wall and our blood. If he still lives, I will find him. Until I return, Winterfell is yours." Brandon tried to protest, but his father silenced him with a hand on his shoulder. "A Stark must always be in Winterfell. Promise me you will remain." Brandon promised, though his heart burned. Edric rode north before the next moonrise. None saw him again. Winter deepened. The days grew short and gray, and the people of Winterfell began to speak in hushed tones of ghosts upon the northern wind. Brandon ruled in his father's stead, young and uncertain. His sister Sansa sang to keep the hall bright, her voice a comfort to the fearful. Then, one morning, the sky turned black. The sun vanished behind a curtain of storm, and the air filled with fine, glittering snow. From the north came a horn blast, long, low, and terrible. The wall had spoken again. Messengers rode out and did not return. Those who climbed the towers swore they saw strange shapes moving in the distance, like riders upon pale horses. The snow fell heavier, the air colder, until even the hot springs began to steam less fiercely. That night, as Brandon walked the battlements, he saw something vast upon the horizon, a white line moving across the land, endless and silent. He ran to the godswood, calling for the Maester, for his men, for anyone who would listen. But the weirwood alone answered him. Its face seemed to shift in the torchlight, the carved eyes glowing faintly red. A whisper rose from its roots, soft and sorrowful. Blood for blood, as ever it was. The wall remembers. The wall calls. Brandon fell to his knees. "Take me then," he cried. "If my father and brother are gone, let me pay their price." The wind roared through the trees. Snow whirled upward in a great spiral. The whisper deepened. "No, not you. Your line is not yet done." When morning came, the storm had passed. The fields were covered in snow so deep it buried the fences. The wall loomed unchanged, but a shadow seemed to lie within its depths, a shape like a man, vast and indistinct. Brandon stood at the gates, staring north until frost clung to his lashes. "If you can hear me," he whispered, "I will not let your sacrifice be forgotten. So long as one Stark endures, the wall will stand." Behind him, Sansa's song rose from the hall, a song of the builder and the blood that binds the cold. The wind carried her voice northward, through the forests and over the wall itself, into the land of endless snow. There, in the heart of the storm, 2 figures stood side by side, one cloaked in frost, the other pale as moonlight. They turned as the song reached them. "The wall remembers," whispered one. "The north endures," answered the other. And the storm, for a time, was still. The storm that had swallowed the north at last passed, leaving behind a silence so deep it seemed to devour sound itself. Snow covered every roof, every wall, every path. Winterfell lay buried, a fortress half swallowed by ice, its towers like dark teeth rising through the white. Yet within its heart, fires still burned, and the blood of the Starks still beat. Lord Brandon Stark ruled in the long winter that followed, a lord too young for his burden, too haunted for peace. He had watched his father and brother vanish beyond the wall, and in the still hours of night he would see their faces in his dreams. Edric standing upon the wall's crest, frost creeping through his beard, and Torrhen beside him, his eyes blue and unblinking. "We stand watch," they whispered. "The wall remembers." He would wake in the dark, gasping, his breath misting before him. Some nights he would rise from his bed and wander the silent corridors of Winterfell, listening for the groan of ice or the crack of distant thunder that meant the wall stirred again. Sansa, his sister, alone, could draw warmth from him. She sang by the fires, her voice weaving through the hall like light in the gloom. Her songs told of the Builder, of Bran the First and Rickon the Second, of blood that bound the wall and hearts that held the north. Even in fear, her voice was steady. "We are the fire and the frost," she would say to the frightened children. "The north remembers because it must." Yet outside, the world forgot. The southern kings quarreled over crowns of gold and steel, far from the snow and shadow. The north's ravens flew unanswered. The wall became a tale to frighten southern children, its watchers little more than ghosts in songs. But the cold was patient, and the wall's power was not dead, only dreaming. In the 13th year of Brandon's rule, a great quake shook the north. The earth groaned like a dying beast, and the towers of Winterfell swayed upon their stone legs. When the tremor passed, the hot springs ran red as blood. The maester said it was only iron from deep below. Brandon knew better. That night, he went to the Godswood. The weirwood stood half buried in snow, its face half frozen, half weeping. He laid his hand against its trunk, and beneath his fingers he felt a faint thrum, as of something stirring beneath the roots. "Is it time?" he whispered. The wind answered with a sigh. The wall wakes. Before dawn, a raven came from the shadow tower. Its message was brief. The dead walk again. The wall does not hold. Brandon gathered his men and his bannermen, the Snowhands, the Ryswells, the Mormonts, the Flints. All came when he called. In the great hall, beneath the banners of the direwolf, he stood tall and grim. "Our fathers built the wall," he said, his voice carrying through the cold air. "They gave their blood to bind it, and still it holds. But now it weakens. The wall remembers us, and we must remember it. I will ride north, not to fight, but to answer." Sansa rose from her seat, her face pale. "You would give your life as they did?" Brandon met her eyes. "If that is the price, then yes, the wall must never fall." "You are the last, brother," she said. "If you go and do not return," he touched her cheek gently, "then Winterfell will have its song. Keep it. Keep the fire burning." At dawn, he rode from Winterfell with 500 men. The sky was white, the air sharp as knives. For 7 days they rode through forests where the trees groaned under their burdens of ice. Wolves followed them, silent as shadows. When they reached the wall, the world seemed to hold its breath. It was changed. The great barrier rose before them, higher than mountains, yet no longer smooth or whole. Its face was riven with cracks, wide and deep, each glowing faintly blue from within. The air itself was colder there, cold enough to burn. The watchmen had deserted their posts. Only the sound of wind remained. Brandon dismounted and walked forward. He placed a gloved hand upon the ice and felt it move beneath his touch, slow and vast, like the shifting of a great beast in slumber. "It breathes," he whispered. From the fissures in the ice came faint voices, too low to be words. His men drew back, crossing themselves or whispering prayers, but Brandon stepped closer. "Father, brother, if you dwell within, hear me. The wall weakens, and I will not let your work fail. Tell me what must be done." The wind rose, and for a heartbeat, he thought he saw them, Edric and Torrin, pale and still within the ice, their eyes burning faintly blue. "Blood for blood," the air whispered. "The wall for the world." Brandon bowed his head. "Then take it." He drew his dagger, slashed his palm, and pressed it to the ice. His blood hissed as it touched the surface. The light within the wall flared, blue, white, then crimson. His men shouted as the ground shook beneath them. The cracks sealed, the cold deepened, and when it passed, Brandon Stark was gone. Only his sword remained, frozen half within the ice. When the survivors rode south, they found the snows melting behind them. Spring had returned to the north for the first time in a generation. The rivers ran free, the forests whispered with life. The people rejoiced, calling it the Builder's blessing. Sansa knew better. She felt it the moment her brother vanished, a sudden stillness in her blood, as though something vast had settled into rest. The weirwood and the godswood had frozen solid, its face sealed beneath a thin sheet of ice. That night, she stood before it, alone, her breath clouding the air. "You have them all now," she whispered. "Bran, Rickon, Edric, Torrin, Brandon. Will you take me too?" The frozen face said nothing. Only the faint hum of the springs far below filled the silence. Sansa smiled sadly. "No, you would have me stay, wouldn't you? Someone must tend the fire." And so she did. For years afterward, the North knew peace. The wall stood silent, unbroken, its glow faint but steady. Winter came and went, and the people learned to live without fear. They said the curse was ended, that the blood of the Starks had finally sealed the wall for good. But sometimes, on the coldest nights, when the aurora danced above the snow and the wind blew down from the far north, the watchers upon the wall heard faint voices whispering through the ice, not of death, but of duty. "Hold fast," they murmured. "The north endures." And far away, in the godswood of Winterfell, the weirwood's frozen face seemed to glisten once more, as if a single tear of red sap had thawed and begun to fall. For in the endless circle of ice and blood, nothing was ever truly ended, only bound, waiting for the song to be sung again. Years passed, and the world forgot the thunder of the wall. Generations rose and fell like waves upon a frozen shore. In the south, the maesters wrote that the long night was only legend, and that Bran the Builder was a myth born from snow and superstition. But in the north, no one doubted. The old songs were still sung beside the hearths, and the wind that swept through Winterfell's courtyards still carried the echo of names long dead. Bran, Rickon, Edric, Brandon. Lady Sansa Stark lived longer than any woman in living memory. Her hair turned white, her hands trembled with age, but her eyes, those gray Stark eyes, never lost their fire. The people called her the Lady of Endings, for it was said the cold itself bowed before her hearth. Under her rule, Winterfell stood unbroken through 100 storms. Her voice, soft and even, could still a hall filled with men. Every morning she walked to the Godswood. The Weirwood's face was still sealed beneath ice, but she spoke to it nonetheless, as if the brothers she had lost might hear. "You are quiet now," she would whisper. "Perhaps you sleep, or perhaps you listen." The wall had not stirred in her lifetime. It stood tall, vast, unmoving. The wildlings whispered that they heard songs of the dead carried through its cracks, but none dared to go near. Even the night's watch had dwindled to a few hundred men, relics of an age long past, who kept their lonely vigil more for honor than for need. Peace lay across the north like a heavy cloak. Children grew who had never known hunger or fear. Some said it was the blood of the Starks that kept the darkness at bay, that their sacrifice still lingered in the ice and earth. But others, younger, prouder, began to doubt. "Winter is not what it was," said Lord Cregan Snowhand, a bannerman of Winterfell. "We have no need of old walls and older gods. The time of ghosts is gone." Sansa only smiled when she heard such talk. "When the cold sleeps, men grow bold," she told her granddaughter Lyanna. "But winter never dies. It only waits." Lyanna Stark was her image in youth, dark of hair, proud of spirit, with eyes like the storm. She loved the north fiercely, but her heart longed for more than its endless snow. "If the wall never falls," she said one night as they stood in the Godswood, "then perhaps it is because it has forgotten how to move." Sansa looked at her, grave and calm. "Then pray it never remembers." When the old lady died, the people buried her in the crypts beneath Winterfell, beside her brothers. They carved her likeness in stone, her hands folded upon her breast, and upon the base they etched her words, "The fire remembers." After her death, the seasons grew strange. The summers lasted long, but when winter came, it came hard and sudden. Storms swept down from the far north, unlike any seen in generations. The wall began to hum again, a low, distant vibration that made the air itself tremble. At Castle Black, the old men of the Watch gathered around their fires, listening in silence. "It's the Builder's heart," one whispered. "He stirs again." And beyond the wall, the white wastes began to move. Lyanna Stark, now Lady of Winterfell, was the first to see it. She stood atop the battlements one morning and looked north, where the sky shimmered faintly green. The aurora danced, slow, mournful, endless, and beneath it, far beyond the line of the horizon, a faint blue light flickered in the snow. She sent ravens to every holdfast, every watchtower, calling her bannermen to her side. "The wall lives again," she wrote, "and the dead may not sleep forever." Within days, riders came from all across the north. They brought tales of strange things, frozen forests where no bird sang, wolves with eyes like pale fire, and stars that wept red as blood. Lyanna called her council in the great hall. The lords of the north gathered, their breath misting in the cold air. "The wall has kept its silence for 100 years," she said. "Now it hums like a harp. Tell me, what do you make of that?" Some spoke of omens, others of storms. But one old man, blind and bent with age, rose from the shadows. "The wall remembers," he said. "It remembers the blood that built it, and the blood that must renew it." The hall fell silent. Lyanna's hand tightened upon the arm of her chair. "You speak of sacrifice." "I speak of balance," said the old man. "The wall was bound with the blood of the Starks. When that blood thins, its strength fades. It calls now, my lady, and it calls for you." That night, Lyanna went alone to the Godswood. The ice upon the weirwood had begun to melt, streaks of red sap trickling down its trunk like tears. She laid her hand upon it and felt warmth beneath the bark, faint but real. "I am of their blood," she said softly. "If you call me, I will answer. But tell me this, is it my life you ask, or my line?" The wind sighed through the branches. "The wall remembers," it whispered. "The wall requires." When dawn came, she summoned her son, Kriegard, a boy of 15 summers, sharp-eyed and solemn beyond his years. "One day, you will rule Winterfell," she told him. "But remember, our house was not built for rule. It was built for endurance. Our crown is frost, our duty the wall. Never forget that." He did not understand, not yet, but he promised. That same night, as snow began to fall, Lyanna rode from Winterfell with a small company. None saw her return. A week later, a great tremor shook the land. The wall shone white as the moon, and a crack of lightning split the sky. The watchers swore they heard a cry, one voice, strong and fierce, echoing from within the ice. When it faded, the wall stood smooth and whole once more, brighter than it had been in centuries. The next morning, a single raven came to Winterfell. Its feathers were white as snow, its eyes the color of smoke. It carried no message. Only a single drop of red stained its claw. Kriegard Stark took it as a sign. He ordered his mother's likeness carved beside those of the builder and his sons, deep in the crypts. Upon her tomb, he inscribed no words, only the direwolf of House Stark howling toward the north, and so the blood was renewed once more. The years that followed were mild, the harvests rich, the nights calm. Yet when the wind blew down from the wall, it carried with it a faint sound, not the wail of storm or the howl of wolf, but the low, steady heartbeat of something vast and patient. The wall lived, the blood endured, and far beyond its frozen crown, in the land of endless night, pale shapes moved slowly through the snow, watching, waiting, whispering the same word the wind had always known: Stark. Generations had turned like the seasons, and the memory of the long night was but a tale told to restless children. The wall still rose vast and unbroken, a gleaming scar of blue and white that split the world between the living and the lost. Winterfell thrived beneath its silent shadow. Kings came and fell in the south, yet the north endured, the Starks enduring with it, bound to duty, bound to the wall. Kriegard Stark ruled in those days, son of Lyanna the Brave. He was tall and grave, his face hewn from the same cold strength as his forebears, his eyes the gray of storm-tossed skies. The people called him the Quiet Wolf, for he spoke seldom and listened much. It was said that when he walked the Godswood, the weirwoods bent their branches toward him as though in reverence. He had been only a boy when his mother rode north and vanished. The wall had blazed with light that night, and since then its surface had gleamed with strange brilliance. Neither ice nor fire, but something older than both. The Watch called it the Lady's Veil. None dared to touch it. Kriegard never spoke of his mother's fate, though he carried her wolf's head brooch upon his cloak. Yet sometimes, when the night was still and the moon full upon the snow, he would ride alone into the wilds and stand where the frozen rivers met the northern wind, his eyes fixed upon the horizon. In the 30th year of his rule, a winter came unlike any before. The snows did not fall. They poured, thick as stone, burying forests, freezing rivers, turning the sky itself to iron. The aurora no longer danced. Instead, faint lights pulsed upon the edge of sight, blue and cold and slow. The Meisters muttered of omens. The small folk whispered that the wall had begun to sing again, And it was true. At first the sound was soft, a deep, distant hum, like the voice of the earth itself. But with each passing night it grew louder, rising and falling in slow rhythm. The men of the watch heard it in their bones. Some said it was a warning. Others swore it was a song of mourning. Then came the ravens, dozens of them, their feathers silvered with frost, their eyes gleaming white. They carried no messages, only fell dead upon Winterfell's walls, their wings frozen stiff. Kragar took it as a summons. "The wall calls," he said to his maester, "as it has always called us. I will answer." He gathered his household guard, 300 strong, and rode north through storm and snow. The air grew colder with each league, until their beards hung with icicles and their breath froze in the air like drifting smoke. When at last they reached the wall, they found it transformed. It glowed faintly in the darkness, not blue but white, pure and blinding. The watch stood trembling at its base, torches flickering in their shaking hands. "The lady's veil is gone," their commander told him. "The ice moves, my lord. It breathes." Kragar dismounted. He walked forward, boots crunching upon frost. The surface of the wall shimmered, smooth and glassy, and beneath it, faint shapes moved, slow, vast, and indistinct. He pressed his palm to the ice. The cold bit deep, and for an instant he felt it, a heartbeat, vast and steady, pulsing beneath his hand. The wall lived. That night, as the storm howled and the men huddled by their fires, Kragar dreamt. He dreamt of the builders, Bran, Rickon, Edric, Brandon, Lyanna, standing in a ring of snow, their eyes bright with ghostly fire. "You have our blood," Bran said. "You have our burden," murmured Rickon. Lyanna's voice was softest of all. "The wall remembers. It grows restless. It calls for what it is owed." Kragar knelt before them. "Then take me, if that is the price." But Bran shook his head. "Not yet. The wall must not only endure, it must change. The old magic wanes. The world is shifting. The wall must become more than stone and blood." "What more can there be?" Kragar asked. "Memory," Bran said. "You must give it memory." He woke gasping, his hands numb, frost upon his hair. At dawn he sent riders south to Winterfell, bearing orders for the Meisters to gather every scroll, every tale, every record of the age before, the legends of the first men, the songs of the children, the stories of the long night. "Bring them all north," he commanded. "The wall must remember." For 3 months the work went on. Carts laden with parchment and hides came trudging through the snow, guarded by grim-faced men. The Meisters muttered of folly, but none dared refuse. At the wall, Kragar built great fires that hissed and spat in the cold wind. Upon those fires, he burned the scrolls one by one, histories, myths, songs, every memory of the North. As the smoke rose, the wind caught it and carried it against the wall, where it vanished into the ice. When the last scroll was gone, the wall began to shine. Images flickered faintly within. Faces, banners, battles, rivers, wolves. All that had been written was now alive within the ice. The men fell to their knees. Kragar stared in awe. "It remembers," he whispered. "It will never forget again." That night, as the fires died, the hum ceased. The wall grew silent, and the cold eased its grip upon the land. For the first time in years, stars blazed clear and sharp above the frost. But peace never comes without cost. When morning broke, Kragar was gone. His horse stood tethered at the base of the wall, its mane crusted with frost. In the place where he had stood, a new image shimmered faintly within the ice. A man tall and stern, his hand pressed to the surface, his eyes like storm clouds. The watchers wept. for they knew what it meant. They returned his sword to Winterfell, where young Lord Harrion Stark received it in silence. He placed it in the crypt beside his forebears, beneath the statues of those who had given their lives to the wall. Upon Cregarde's stone likeness, they carved no words, only the sigil of House Stark and the ancient oath of their line. So long as we stand, the wall shall never fall. Years later, travelers who came north in summer said the wall no longer gleamed blue or white, but silver, as though it reflected every dawn and dusk at once. And when the wind blew from its peaks, it carried faint whispers, the songs of the builders, the stories of the kings, the voices of those who had lived and died for the North. Some called it the Wall of Memory. Others said it was alive, thinking, dreaming the dreams of men. But the North still knew it by its true name, the Wall of the Starks. And though centuries might pass, though kings might rise and fall, its shadow never left the hearts of men. For as long as the wall endured, so too did the blood that had built it, and in the frozen silence beyond, where even light faltered, the cold ones still lingered, patient, eternal, waiting for the day the blood would fail and the North would sleep at last. Part 14. Many lifetimes had flowed past like meltwater through the valleys before the end came. Men forgot what it was to tremble at winter's step. The wall no longer shone so fiercely. Its silver heart had dulled to a gray mirror that caught the sun and gave back only pale light. The watch had dwindled to a handful of oath-keepers who kept their fires more for memory than defense. Yet still, they said the wall breathed. In the still of night, one could feel the faint, slow rhythm of its pulse beneath the ice, the heart of all the blood that had been given. From Winterfell now ruled Edryn Stark, the last of the long line. He was a man of quiet thought, broad-shouldered and grave, with the iron of all his forefathers in his face. He had studied the old chronicles, those that spoke of Bran the Builder, and of every Stark who had fed the wall with blood and will. To his children he would say, "We are not kings. We are the wall between dawn and darkness. Forget that, and the world forgets itself." The world, however, had already begun to forget. South of the Neck, men laughed at tales of ice demons and magic older than fire. Lords warred over silver mines, not snowfields. The citadel called the wall an accident of craft, not of sorcery. And even in Winterfell, there were some who dreamed of warmer lands and fairer skies. It was in Edryn's 50th winter that the first signs returned. The wolves began to vanish from the woods. The rivers froze early and did not thaw. Nights grew long and full of whispers. On the first moon of deep winter, a boy from the watch arrived half mad with fear. His eyes were wide, his skin pale as milk. "They move again," he gasped. "Shadows under the ice. The wall hums like thunder." Edryn sent ravens, though none returned. On the third night, sleep fled him, and he went to the Godswood. The weirwood still stood, gnarled and watchful. He laid his palm upon it and felt a faint warmth, as though a heartbeat answered his own. "Is it time?" he whispered. The wind through the branches spoke in a dozen voices, his father's, his mother's, the long line behind them, blood for blood. The wall wakes. By dawn he had made his choice. He called his sons, Bran the elder, fierce and proud, Willem the younger, quiet and clever, and told them the truth of their house. "Each Stark before me has given what was needed. The wall will have its due once more. If I do not return, the North is yours. Remember who we are." Bran struck his chest in protest. "Let me go in your stead." Edryn's gaze softened. "Your blood must live, else all we've built is for naught. The wall must never drink the last of us. That night, he rode north with but a dozen companions. The snow swallowed them before morning. For 7 days the storm raged. Then, on the 8th, the clouds broke, and the people of Winterfell saw a great pillar of light rising far to the north, white at its base, red at its heart, vanishing into the heavens. The tremor that followed shook the stones of every holdfast. The aurora burned crimson for 3 nights, and when it faded, the air was still as death. Messengers rode out and found the wall changed. It was smooth again, whole and shining, its color no longer silver, but the pale gold of sunrise. No body was found, nor trace of those who had gone with the Lord of Winterfell. Only his sword lay at the base, fused into the ice, its hilt wrapped in a sheath of frost that shimmered like glass. Bran and Willem brought it home in silence. They placed it upon the tomb of their father, beneath the crypts where all the builders slept. There the fires burned 3 days and nights without being fed, and when they died, the smoke drifted north, drawn as if by unseen breath. Years rolled on. The long winter broke, and spring returned brighter than any in memory. The harvests swelled, the rivers sang, and the wall, new made and golden, stood silent. The Meisters proclaimed the age of miracles ended. But the North knew better. They felt the peace not as release, but as promise kept. At every generation's turning, a Stark would ride north to stand before the wall, to place a hand upon its surface, and whisper the ancient words, "We are the Watchers. We are the wall." And always, beneath the palm, there would be warmth, proof that the blood still lived within the ice. In time, songs were sung of them all, of Bran the builder who dreamed the first stones into place, of Rickon, Edric, Brandon, Lyanna, Krigard, and Edrin, of the countless nameless who gave their strength and silence to hold back the dark. The singers said that when the final winter came, the wall itself would rise and walk south, a living mountain of ice and memory, led by the spirits of the Starks, to meet the night in one last battle. Whether that day would ever come, none could say. The world was wide, and men's hearts were forgetful. Yet in the far north, when the wind was right and the stars burned clear, travelers swore they heard a voice moving through the cold. It was not the howl of wolves, nor the cry of storm, but something deeper, steadier, like the sound of a hammer striking stone, again and again, building still. They said it was the builder's heart, beating on, and those who heard it would feel their own hearts quicken, as if some old part of them remembered the oath written in blood and frost. So the tale ended where it had begun, with the wall unbroken, the north unyielding, and the name of Stark carried on the wind. And though ages would pass and empires fall to dust, the promise remained, whispered by ice and fire alike. Hold fast. The wall endures. The North remembers.